Okay, guys, so this lesson is our expression lesson for the week. So lesson 6, and we're actually going to focus on using complex structures to really boost our answers. So whether they are speaking or writing, whether they are the 90-word question or the 150-word questions, including complex structures within your answer will really help you boost your mark. So that's really going to make the difference between a student who has a 6 or a 7 and that really plateaus at a 7 and someone who gets to 8 or a 9. Because you definitely can't get 8 or a 9 if you don't have complex structure. So a text that you've written or that you've said that has a certain level of grammar, that has a certain level of fluency, implied by the complex structures, it looks more complex, it looks a lot more interesting, it basically looks higher, a lot higher. So not including complex structure, even if you completely master your tenses, if you're really good at what you're doing, you manipulate your grammar easily, is a very good 6 or a very good 7. But you wouldn't be able to get 8 or 9 if you didn't have that complex structure, that thing that puts you on top, really. And that makes the difference between a good GCSE student and a potential A-level student as well. So that's really what we want to achieve. We want to get the top grade. So here the complex structures are going to be there to impress your examiner. So if you're doing the 90-word questions, the one that you have in common with foundation, you will need 1, 2 complex structures. And the best, if they are expressed correctly, that's better. But even attempting complex structures for the 90-word question is already very, very good. And then the 150-word question, you need to use more, impress the examiner. That's basically it. So in this unit of the expression lesson on the booklet, they have separated in 3 parts. So the subordinate, we'll see that is using the relative pronoun, the one that we've done last week. So that is basically why we've done pronoun last week, because we're going to need them for complex structure a lot more than you think. So subordinate, relative pronoun, object pronouns, so either direct or indirect. That's also part of what we've seen last week. And then we'll have a look at some more complex structures, some more complex grammar. And you'll discover some more stuff. First thing first is the get started. So if you have a look at the text on the get started, is actually an example. So I'm going to share that with you. No, that's the first page, sorry. There we are. Right. So here the text in the get started is really an example of a student who has tried to include complex structures. So have a look at it as a very good example. Pay specific attention to the pronouns. Any pronouns, so you've learned a lot of them last week, so make sure you have a look at them, try to recognize them. I mean, they highlighted, but try to really remember if they are direct object, if they are relative pronoun, whatever you can take from last week's grammar lesson, try to include it there, try to understand really what's happening in that text. And then at the bottom of the page, they are basically going to ask you to practice some of these structures using the context of that example of that text. So if we have a look at, I'm going to move that, there we are. At the first unit is how to use subordinate clauses to write more interestingly. So subordinate, you've probably never seen that word before, or maybe when you were doing your SATs when you were in year 6, so that's a long way away. Here, what you need to remember is that basically we're trying to have you put a sentence inside of a sentence, kind of. Not really, but it's kind of a sentence inside of a sentence. And we're going to use first relative pronoun to embed that, to try and put sentences within sentences. And we're also going to use clauses like quand, pendant que, au moment que, basically to express time. So when, for example, I was reading, first sentence, when you arrived. It's basically embedding two verbs, one, two together, one clause into another. That's how we call it. So clause here. So that would be how we try and extend our sentence using complex structure. So you could use and, you could use but, and that is balancing your sentence, and we've already learned how to do that, and you're quite good at this. Here we're trying to embed sentences using relative pronoun, using stuff that are a little bit more ambitious, a little bit higher, just to prove that we can actually do it. So it is basically our grammar lesson about the relative pronoun and all that jazz, nothing more. But here you're going to use it in context. That's what this unit is going to ask you, and ask you to use the pronouns that you've learned about last week, to use them in the context of your answers. And actually, I don't know why I moved, because I want to stay there. And actually, this page, the whole page here, is just practice. So practice for the relative pronoun, practice for the subordinate clauses. It's last week in the grammar, we've done it out of context. So done a lot of practice of how to do it. Here you're doing it inside the context of sentences and inside of the context of an exam question, which is basically what we're going to need to do ultimately. So our second page that I was going to load, there we are, up. Right. Unit 2 is about object pronouns. So here again, object pronouns, still pronouns. So that's basically what we've done the lesson on pronouns last week. So on last Thursday, using object pronouns in the sentence just looks smart, and that's what we're trying to do. Look smart. It's either a direct object pronoun or it's going to be an indirect. So I'm just going to very, very quickly stop sharing that. I'll share my little whiteboard. There we are up. So, oh no, my pen doesn't work. Right, brilliant. So not sharing for now, but it's fine. So if we are using the direct object pronoun, remember, j'ai mangé la pomme, the J apostrophe is the subject, so j'ai mangé la pomme. Et manger is the verb, and then la pomme is your object. So that you would have learned in your lesson last week. So la pomme is the object. And then when you want to change it into the pronoun, it becomes la, because you want to change the apple into it. So la pomme becomes la. And then because j'ai mangé, the verb starts with a vowel, so you put the L apostrophe. Je l'ai mangé, using the direct object. Je l'ai mangé, direct object pronoun. And then remember, the indirect is like, I've given the apple to my mom, so j'ai donné la pomme à ma mère. Here you want to, so à ma mère, so to my mom is going to be your indirect object pronoun. You want to, no, your indirect object, sorry. And you want to change it into the pronoun because you want to say, I give it to her. And her here is going to be our pronoun. So you're going to change to my mom into her. And we did the same in French. So j'ai donné la pomme à ma mère. You're going to change à ma mère to lui, L-U-I, which is going to be the pronoun for the indirect object. So in the shortened version of the sentence, I gave it to her. I mean, I gave the apple to her. That would be je lui ai donné la pomme. And if you combine both of them, the direct object and the indirect object, you're changing to my mom and the apple into it, and to my mom into her. Like that gives you something like I gave it to her. And in French, that would be je la lui ai donné. Okay, well, that is not something that you're discovering today because you would have seen it in last week's lesson in the grammar. But that was just a just to remind you of things. But here, using this structure, using this, I know you find it difficult, but using this will look smart. And that is a complex structure. Even if it's not long, sometimes a complex structure could be something very long. Sometimes it could be something very small, very short, but looking very, very smart. And that is definitely the case of the object pronouns, either direct or indirect. So that's what the second unit is about. How to make the best use of object pronoun. So I'm going to let you practice on this page now that I've kind of explained that a little bit to you. And then moving on to the third unit, how to impress with complex grammar. So here, this page is basically about a few other complex structures that exist. It's very, very interesting, and actually we'll be covering each and every one of them in the coming weeks. So some of them are infinitive structures, some of them are the subjunctive. Very interesting for all of them. So we'll definitely have a look at all of them. We'll learn all of them. But I think it's very interesting for you to give it a try now, even though we haven't properly learned them yet, just to see how well you get it by yourself. That's always important to discover things by yourself before I explain to you. And then we'll learn that in the coming weeks. So have a look at that and give it the best try. They have here explain all the complex structures, so that shouldn't be that hard, but you never know. And then the last page is, you know how it works, it's the simple response. So here, the simple response, just try it out. It will just give you a better use of the context, so you'll see better in the context of the exam question. So have a look at that. Try to answer the questions that they're giving you just to understand. It give you another example of someone who's answered with complex structure and to understand them in context. And then using all this, try to use all that to write your own answer in the your turn, the do now activity. Try to use all these structures to try and answer by yourself. So I'm actually quite impatient to have a look at your answers to see if you've managed to embed complex structures. It's very interesting to just create a bank of complex structures that you can use every now and then, because they will always be very useful, and that's basically how you'll get the maximum points for each answers. So that was me for the expression lesson. That is very interesting this week. I'm going to let you do your booklet and then come back to me. Remember to only submit the exam style question. So basically just the 150 word text to me, so that way I can mark it and tell you how it went. So good luck for that, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.